Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development, I'm happy to welcome you to today's event, where we will be addressing the urgency to step up climate adaptation action. Before we kick off today's event, I would like to take the opportunity to thank MEP Ms. Miapetra Kumpula-Natri and MEP Ms. Spyraki, both co-chairs of the European Parliament Intergroup, for hosting today's event. So prior to passing the floor to our MEPs for their opening remarks, I would like to invite our audience to send us your questions during the event. For this, you can use the Q&A box at the right of your screen, moreover choosing the all panelists option. Within your question, please make sure to also note the speaker to whom your question is best addressed, so that on behalf of the Secretariat of the Intergroup, we can facilitate a fruitful discussion to follow. So once again, thank you very much for joining us today. Ms. Kumpula-Natri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ilias, and thank you. I want to start with thanking the partners we are organizing this with, because this is very interesting and a new dimension for the so important climate change discussion, and namely adaptation and urgency for that. And I hope during the day we will have some concrete ideas as this preparation group for the mission has prepared. So on behalf of our intergroup, I'm very pleased to host this and ask for the good debate for the day. The climate and biodiversity crisis are very acute. European Parliament has declared climate emergency. According to the European State of the Climate Report, 2020 was one of the 3 warmest years on recorded globally. And in Europe, annual temperature was the highest on record. Winter in northeastern Europe was nearly 1.9 centigrades warmer than the previous report, with low sea ice cover for the Baltic Sea and low number of days with snow in some areas. And that is also causing adaptation needs. During this spring, UNEP launched its first synthesis report on climate, biodiversity and pollution emergencies, and it states that the world is on track for warming of at least 3% above pre-industrial levels by 2100. This means missing the Paris target. So we need to act, and we need to do it now, reducing the emissions and acting. And European climate law is an important legislation as it sets binding emission reduction goals. Reducing emission at least 55% by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2050 are the targets. Fit for 55 package, soon proposed by the Commission, needs to be aligned with these targets. But I think EU member states, at least most of them, and also European citizens and businesses are ready to act towards the climate neutrality. And Green Deal is a strategy that can at its best create opportunities for citizens, workers and businesses. But even we could succeed radically, cut the emissions as we must, the globe will face warming, and we need to also be prepared for this. At the topic today, global warming causes unpredictable consequences, and we have already witnessed this increase of extreme natural and weather conditions such like floods, thunders, melting ice, dryness, and this is very close to the Arctic when we talk about the losing the ice. And we probably will witness much more in the future. So we need climate policies, but also clear strategy to adapt for the change that we have ahead. We need solutions and innovation to be able to cope with the inevitable changes. And that is why this proposed mission, a climate resilient Europe, is very highly important, and I'm proud to have it today on the agenda with so many speakers. And I also would like to highlight the importance of understanding the social impact of the climate change and that integration to the adaptation. Changing conditions affect strongly people's lives, health, work, and not least the vulnerable groups. Some will lose the jobs because of the transition, but new jobs will emerge, and we need to make sure workers have the required skills and know-how for the future jobs. And what are the future jobs? So only way for us to succeed to achieve climate resilient Europe is to keep everyone on board. So no one should be left behind. Now I will give the speech to my colleague, dear co-chair Marina Spyraki.
Thank you, Miapetra. Thank you for organizing this meeting. Thank you, Elias, for the support. And of course, I would like to thank all the participants because of this very timely debate and very timely exchange of views. Achieving the climate neutrality goal requires an unprecedented transformation of all sectors of the economy and a massive investment as well. As reported in the recent report about climate policy action by the European Parliamentary Research Service, anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions are now higher than ever. Increased anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions have led to atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide, of methane, and nitrous oxide unprecedented in at least the last 800,000 years. As the rapporteur of the methane strategy and under this capacity, I would like to underline that we have to focus not only on CO2 emissions, but also to the other greenhouse gas emissions, starting from methane. Reducing methane emission is indispensable in the fight against climate change, in line with the Paris Agreement goals and also in the EU Green Deal. More than half of global methane emissions stem from human activities in three sectors: fossil fuels, waste, and agriculture, and we need to provide a cross-sectoral and holistic approach to establish a fair framework that provides incentives and rewards, especially for front runners for their efforts. The EU should lead as the front runner and motivate other countries to raise their ambition in line with the Paris Agreement ahead of COP26, and I think this is a milestone. EU can influence the climate policies worldwide with climate diplomacy, with trade policy, regulation, carbon pricing, by setting standards, which is one of the main tools that we have, and technological cooperation and development aid. The key global actor is the US, as we all agree. The election of Joe Biden as president of the US is changing the international dynamics concerning climate change. US is the world's second largest greenhouse gas emissions, and with the present leadership, it rejoined the Paris Agreement and plans to raise its climate ambition. This year is very critical for international climate action. Paris Agreement parties must submit their long-term strategies and update their national determined contributions ahead of COP26 conference, which will take place in Glasgow in November. Major economies have already committed to long-term climate neutrality. Those new and updated commitments will be the main agenda of COP26 in Glasgow, which will also finalize the rulebook of the Paris Agreement. So, concluding, I would like to underline that to this COP, we have to use all the available tools. Data and knowledge are critical for better understanding and managing climate risk, enhancing adaptive capacities, and supporting transforming innovation towards a more climate resilient society. Research and innovation also will harness the advancements in climate risk assessment. In other words, we should use any possible vehicle to tackle climate change and get ready deep resilience. Thank you very much for being here, being with us, and discussing this very high importance topic.
Thank you very much, MEPs Ms. Kumpula-Natri and MEPs Ms. Maria Spyraki for setting the scene with regards to today's discussions, but also for underlining the timely nature of today's event. So on this note, I would like to provide the floor to Ms. Clara De La Torre, Deputy Director General for Climate Action in the European Commission. Ms. Clara De La Torre, prior to holding that position, was also Director for Transport in the Director General for Research and Innovation in the GRTD. So I think it's an intervention we're all very much looking forward. So Ms. De La Torre, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elias. Good morning, co-chairs of the Intergroup, members of Parliament, members of the Committee of Regions, ladies and gentlemen. It's as our co-chair was saying, it's a very timely discussion for all the reasons they have both set up. As MEP Kumpula was saying, we have just concluded the hottest decade on record, during which the title of the hottest year has been beaten 8 times. So it is clear that we have to prevent the unadaptable and adapt to the unpreventable. So we all know that unfortunately, even if we stopped emitting greenhouse gases, we will still not prevent the climate impacts that are occurrent. And we see all these awful events that happen everywhere. We should not forget that this is happening effects everywhere. We are having forest fires, we are having heat waves in the right above the Arctic Circle, devastating droughts in the Mediterranean region, hurricanes in outermost regions. We have seen bark beetle outbreaks in Central and Eastern Europe. So everyone is affected. At the same time, apart from beyond these events, which can be seen quite easily, we have also other events that are happening almost in the shadow, like desertification, loss of biodiversity, land and ecosystem degradation, ocean acidification, sea level rise, which will affect 40% of the GDP of the European Union. So we are not only affecting, the climate change is not only affecting the planet, is affecting our lives, is affecting our health, our well-being, and we are suffering more and more from these heat waves, from problems with food security. It's worsening social inequalities, and it is also very important for the European Union, threatening cultural heritage. We know as well that the EU is and will increasingly be affected by climate impacts outside Europe through cascading and spillover effects on, for example, trade or migration. We know as well that the economic losses from more frequent climate-related extreme events are increasing. In the EU, these losses average already 12 billion a year. So it's a question as well of economic efficiency. And these losses are distributed unevenly, harming regions that may already face challenges like growth or high youth unemployment and are still affected in every other region in the world. This is why the European Commission has published a strategy on adaptation, precisely to prepare ourselves for the future. The strategy sets out how the European Union can precisely adapt to the unavoidable impacts of climate change and become, because let us not forget that we have these commitments as well in the Paris Agreement, become climate resilient by 2050. We have designed this strategy with 4 main characteristics. One, say that the adaptation strategy is smarter because it must be informed by robust data and risk assessment tools that are available to everyone, to decision makers, to families building their homes, for businesses in coastal areas knowing where they are going to set their production facilities, for farmers planning better their crops. And this strategy proposes as well to push the frontiers of knowledge on adaptation so that we can gather more and better data on climate-related risks and losses, as Ms. Spyraki was saying. And for that, I'm sure Mrs. Hedegaard will highlight this. The mission is a very important tool. We also wanted that this adaptation strategy meant a faster journey to adaptation. Though adaptation you never reach there, it's a process. We have to adapt more quickly and more, as has already been said, more systemically, more comprehensively. And therefore, this strategy aims at developing and rolling out adaptation solutions that reduce the climate-related risks, that increases climate protection, and namely safeguards the availability of fresh water. It's a sector which is highly important in our strategy. The third characteristic of our strategy is that it is more systemic. It has more systemic approach, as we all know, climate change impacts all levels of society and across all sectors of the economy. Therefore, we have to adopt a holistic approach. And therefore, what we are doing with this strategy is mainstreaming climate resilience in all relevant policies. And let us not forget policies that at first sight are sometimes not considered, but are now being very much put on upfront. For example, in macro-fiscal policy, we know when there are losses, there are many losses for the private sector, but there are many losses for the public sector. Therefore, the macro fiscal policy has to take into consideration the climate-related effects. At the same time, we have, and we see that with the mission, we have to make sure that the local and regional dimension or solution, I would say, to these challenges are there. It would not be a fully fledged strategy if we had not, as fourth characteristic, if we had not stepped up our international dimension. The EU will increase support to international climate resilience and preparedness through the provision of resources, prioritizing action and increasing effectiveness through scaling up international finance, certainly, but also through stronger global engagement and exchanges on adaptation. We will intensify and broaden our support to local and regional authorities, including with the support of the Global Covenant of Mayors. We integrate as well climate resilience in our international discussions and agreements, and we have an additional focus on humanitarian needs, development, and peace. What are we going to do next? We are going to implement this strategy. We are already implementing a strategy with 14 specific actions, and one important dimension of adaptation is precisely research and innovation. And the mission that Mrs. Konegard will present to you is key in designing and developing many of the policy tools and the solutions that we need to have to address resilience and adaptation. One word on COP, can come back to that afterwards. We have COP in Glasgow in fall, and we would like to bring all partners all world partners to increase their adaptation efforts, and we hope that in Glasgow we'll have as well success in terms of adaptation policies. The Commission is discussing this strategy with both the Parliament and the Council, of course. Member States are expected to agree on conclusions on adaptation by the end of this month. But the support of you all, Members of Parliament, to raise awareness and demand from your own constituencies to really mobilize policies, mobilize actions, mobilize resources at local and regional levels in different constituencies is crucial. So this is why I'm particularly grateful for the event that you have kindly organized and hosted today, and I look forward to the discussion during this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. De La Torre, for underlining the climate change effects and challenges in such a holistic manner, addressing the environmental, social, but also economic components of the discussion. I think that at this stage of the event, we have painted a full picture regarding our way towards climate resilience by 2050. Thank you also for underlining the work of the European Commission, including the new EU adaptation strategy, aiming at making adaptation smarter, faster, but also more systemic, as well as assisting in stepping up international action on adaptation. So looking at further solutions and opportunities, I'm very happy to welcome our next speaker, Ms. Connie Hedegaard, who chairs the board of the Horizon Europe Mission Adaptation to Climate Change. Ms. Hedegaard is a former European Commissioner for Climate Action and also Danish Minister for Environment and for Climate and Energy. So climate policy is at the center of Ms. Hedegaard's career. So on behalf of the Secretariat of the Intergroup, I'm very honored and grateful for your participation. Ms. Hedegaard, you have the floor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Elias, and thank you very much for the invitation to take part today, where you really zoom in on adaptation and the urgency in getting that part of the climate effort right in Europe. I don't know, but maybe some of you also, when we heard from Clara Della Torre about the very, very thorough adaptation strategy that we have in Europe, and we know we have the European Green Deal, and now we have the climate law. And maybe you could think, why do we also need a mission on climate adaptation? I think that it's very clear if you read the adaptation strategy, that there have been identified there a number of areas where we need more knowledge, where we need to go one step deeper. And that is, if one should put it very, very short, that is what the mission sets out to try and address. There is one maybe special feature with the way we have sort of embraced this task. I mean, the mission is called the Mission on Adaptation to Climate Change and Societal Change. You will understand it's quite broad. We made sort of the overall vision for our mission a climate resilient Europe, so that it could sort of both be about sort of the very sort of traditional climate adaptation things, but it's also about welfare, it's also about behavior, it's also about health, it is also about systemic change. But the grip that we sort of picked was, we said we need to go out to those who really sit there working with these things when it comes to the implementation. And that's why, if you have the next slide, please, you'll see that we are working very much with regions and communities. If you sort of start from the bottom of this triangle, you can see that we will sort of prepare Europe for climate disruptions and managing the different risks that Clara Della Torre was also mentioned, like heat waves, forest fires, droughts, floods, storms, diseases, what have we. But then we will do it through accelerate transition in up to 200 communities and regions, so that we there could sort of identify best practices that could be shared with more. And we could also, through that very particular way of working and very concrete way of working, we could also identify knowledge gaps. And then in up to 100 regions, we would then build resilience through 100 demonstrators, very specific sort of hands-on upscaled solutions. So that is sort of the picture of what we would like to do. It is clear when you read the adaptation strategy, as I said, it also points to areas where we in Europe need more knowledge, and where this mission can help. Just some examples: better understanding of climate risk and exposure, how to adopt climate risk management. That's one thing that is mentioned. Another is how for Europe to be better and faster at take learnings cross-border. I think you all know that we have splendid standalone projects here and there and everywhere, but how to somehow take the lessons learned and do that as a collective, so that we could faster scale to better solutions. Also here, of course, digital tools will mean a lot. Another thing that was pointed to in the adaptation strategy was how to deploy faster technologies, how to do it faster, but how to have them also being more efficient. So if you take the next slide that comes here, you can see that we are focusing on many of the sort of normal things when we talk about adaptation, ecosystems and nature-based solutions, critical infrastructure, health and well-being, land use and food systems, and water management. But then you can see that we also have the enablers around this. On the top, knowledge and data, very much key. Then we have education and capacity building. Then very obviously sustainable finance and resources are absolutely key. And then we have governance and engagement, and I will come back to that in just a minute. But that is just sort of the model. That's what we're working on. And what we are trying to do now is that we're trying to put some flesh and blood now on exactly how to implement that. We delivered our scoping paper September last year. A group of commissioners gave it the green light this November. And now we have sort of the mandate to come up with a very specific implementation plan. How do you actually do this? That relies very much with the Secretariat in the Commission. In these weeks, actually working on the implementation plan, trying to get some buy-in internally in the different Commission services for this is how we could do this. I mean, just as an example, how to be sure that we will test real transformative solutions. That means you need to know what is already out there, but where are the real gaps, how to identify that. How to sort of prioritize areas of innovation that is the most needed that we would dig into in Europe, and very practical, how to identify the regions and the communities, the respective 200 and 100, and also how to ensure that some of the wide gaps in our adaptation knowledge that the strategy talks about can be closed or at least reduced. So that's the kind of things we're working with right now. Also, one key question to us is, how can we make sure that such a mission is not something where it will take years and years until the European citizens see the added value in it? I mean, there must, within a very foreseeable future, be a clear and visible added value that the European citizens can see, wow, that makes sense when we do things and work together at the European level. Key in our project is also, in our mission is also the need for more and better data and how to have systems to exchange these data in a much more transparent and open manner. And then one thing that Mrs. Kumpula-Natri mentioned just here in the beginning, we also are very much into the socioeconomic vulnerabilities. We need to bring that much more into the picture. And that must also be reflected when we, for instance, talk about the nexus between science and politics, how to carry the citizens in this whole transition. I think that governance is also absolutely key. I think like many of you, we have for a very long time discussed we should get rid of the silos between different issues because we need to work and research much more cross-cutting. But I also think that we have a challenge with the governance model between different policy levels. And also here, I think it's interesting that we go in and say, no, it's not all about member states. It is also about communities and the regional level in order to sort of ensure that there is coherence and cooperation between different policy levels. So at least that is a main point in the mission. The last thing I would mention is the need for accelerated action and change. We could all see that, but how can we ensure that we carry the citizens with us throughout this journey? And that's my last slide that will come here, because we have done quite some effort to try to engage citizens also, both in defining what we now have in front of us at this stage in the work, but also moving forward. Our suggestion is that the communities and the regions will really be, it will be part of the mandate, so to speak, also still to continue to include citizens in this dialogue, so that it's not just a top-down thing, it's also very much a bottom-up thing. And I think that could also be a way to modernize the way that politics works via the citizens. So that is basically where we are at this stage. Hopefully within some few weeks, or at least at the latest in July, before the summer recess, we hope to have been given the green light from the Commission that this mission should, so to speak, survive, should be carried on. You could say, yes, but is that not a given? And I would just conclude with saying, no, it's not necessarily a given. This mission was sort of invented by the former Commission, you know how these things work. But also when everything boils down to sort of the essence, there is also a question of who's going to find the money for this. A lot of private money will have to come in, but which services, which DGs, which commissioners will have to come up with some funding. So there is quite a substantial work going on right now in getting buy-in from different commissioners and from the different member states. But I just end up with this because I think that if you think that this is important and that it would look a bit strange to the European citizens if the mission on climate that everybody says is sort of the new community project we could work together on, if that was not to be, I think that would be really a shame. So I think it's key for the mission on climate adaptation that people in the European Parliament is aware of what is going on and the processes, and hopefully also could sort of help us make the good case for why it would make a lot of sense for us in Europe to have climate adaptation as a joint mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hedegaard, for your remarks, underlining the importance of climate adaptation, but also for presenting the vision behind the mission, serving as a portfolio of actions to better prepare Europe to manage climate risks, but also you mentioned supporting communities and regions and scaling up innovative solutions. So on behalf of the Secretariat, I hope and I wish for all the best concerning the materialization of the mission, as sincerely it is an opportunity. I think hosting MEPs also agreed it's just an opportunity we cannot afford to miss at this stage. So on this note and seamlessly, I would like to transition to our next speaker, Mr. Markku Markkula, who is the chair of the City Board of Espoo, Finland, and president of the Helsinki region. In such capacity, Mr. Markkula is a member of the European Committee of the Regions since 2010, serving in the Commission for Environment, Climate Change and Energy. And specifically, Mr. Markkula is also the rapporteur of the Committee of the Regions on the EU strategy on adaptation to climate change. So, Mr. Markkula, we're all very much looking forward to hearing more from you.
Okay, thank you. And first, my and Committee of the Regions very strong appreciation for the work of the European Parliament and especially your intergroup on the climate. And I know from the past so that Miapetra, Kumpula-Natri and Maria Spyraki have really been instrumental there. So thank you, and let's continue the good collaboration with the Committee of the Regions as well. And of course, I have a privilege now to talk after the Clara de la Torre, who is the key person as a mission manager for the this climate adaptation EU mission, as well as Connie Hedegaard, who has been they both have been very instrumental in getting this mission proposal moving. And especially I was very glad to hear how strongly you stressed the role of regional and local actors, because that's where the action really is. And we've often from the Committee of the Regions side, we have stressed that local governments are responsible for more than 70% of climate change reduction and up to 90% of the climate adaptation action. So the action is really there. But as Connie Hedegaard just said about the financing, it's not only about the public money or not only about the EU money. We need to have everyone committed, and they start being a citizen, but then being as well industrial leaders, political decision makers who need to make this as their key priority, even as we have said, so for local businesses, international, global businesses as well. And so this is something that is going to happen. Why I stress this heavily is as well so that that reading from the Commission documents on this adaptation strategy, so there the financing issues, so they are so crucial, as it's stated there already, so that if we don't operate strongly, so if we let the climate the temperature increase to the 3 degrees centigrade, so that will cause even up to 170 billion euro need for activities or losses and so on. So per year. So that's an amazing amount now when we have talked about the EU recovery and so on. So we need to wake up now. And my key point here is for everyone, so that we need to work together, multi-level governance, mobilizing activities on all levels. That is the key. And that means as well, so that as we have committed ourselves as the 350 members of the Committee of the Regions, so we as part of the EU decision making, so we can mobilize our local city level, municipality level, regional level activities. And this is the key instrument for the success of this mission, as well as, let's say, I would call that 2 other missions, which are very closely related to the cities and regions, the one on smart city development and the one on waters, fresh water, oceans and inland waters as well. So these 3 missions need to work together, but together with the local local implementation policies. And there again stressing that when cities and regions are playing locally a strong role, so it's collaborating locally with the different educational institutions, not only the best universities, but with schools, with children and so on. So everyone has a role to play on this, but especially the role of industry is crucial. We have now started to stress more that not only footprint, carbon footprint, so looking what have been the impacts on how we can calculate what has happened and what are the outcomes, but we need to focus on more on the handprint as well. And with handprint, we stress heavily that it's the new industrial solutions, industrial products, services, systems that have a huge impact. So let's take the biofuel as an example. So what has been the influential role of that in airplanes when they use biofuel instead of the traditional fuel? And there are many, many others, similar small scale, large scale, these kind of products and services which have a huge impact, and that is something that we, the public sector, can take in our active years, create favorable conditions for this kind of industrial development, but as well through public procurement, innovative procurement and other ways we can use and support this kind of development. We can put clear priorities when we have our procurement competition. So we put there strongly in the criteria these elements of the climate. And that is something that needs to happen now. Let me then stress as well, so that now when starting the missions from the Horizon Europe perspective, so what we need to do in parallel with that is so that we need these European research area hubs, regional hubs, ERA hubs, which were mentioned very strongly last September in the speech of Commissioner Maria Gabriel when he addressed a large European audience on research and innovation policy. And with the ERA hubs, we strongly support the fast creation of those. And it's not, again, a new instrument for scientific researchers to do scientific research, but it's more to do the societal innovations, technology assisted innovations, business innovations, support that kind of development, and then having these ERA hubs looking for the research outcomes, the latest knowledge from the perspective of societal development, societal renewal. And that is crucial then. And if we can get these moving fast, even as a kind of a preliminary phase first, so testing the system, having them operating in all parts of Europe. So they will be very instrumental in implementing these EU missions. And now let me link this to add, I don't need to repeat the key, let's say, elements why climate adaptation is essential and so on, but I would like to link that from the Committee of the Region perspective to the other policy areas that are in the hands of both EU Commission and the local and regional level and member states. So first, definitely stressing the importance of recovery and resilience funds. And they need to be integrated more and more to renewal. And this relies on the shoulders of decision makers on a member state level, but as well in cities and regions. And this is targeted to local business and service life development by innovative measures focusing on this systematic transformation of societies. That was already mentioned, strongly emphasized by Clara de la Torre and Connie Hedegaard. It's systematic approach. And there, as Commission has urged the member states to use the largest share of the recovery funds on climate linked with digitalization. That is happening, and I would like to call the Parliament to, let's say, ask strongly from each of the member states. So what is your contribution through this resilience and recovery funds on this climate issue, integrating to digitalization, so speeding up the change. So the other part on this is that innovation and cohesion, they are firmly tied together. That means place-based ecosystem and European partnerships having a crucial role. And this cohesion financing and how we target our cohesion financing regionally. So that is an instrumental for the climate to achieve the targets. My third point here is that in the climate policy, the focus needs to be on using the best knowledge regionally, using that to create favorable conditions for more profound and knowledge-intensive societal transformation. So this means accelerating the positive change, and especially now after COVID-19, when we are looking what is the new normal after COVID. The fourth point is I stress again the role of the science-based knowledge, and on that, so working together with different Commission units, and especially here I want to mention the Joint Research Centre, knowing that Parliament has worked a lot already years through the STOA and other means of collaboration with the Science Meet Parliament, and we've introduced a few years ago a strong instrument, Science Meet Regions, to be heavily integrated as being part of this movement. So this is as well so what we need to mobilize activities in using the scientific knowledge. And then my last point is that actually integrating this, what already for years has been very instrumental at the regional policy level, that's the regional innovation strategies based on smart specialization. And now when this RIS3 is becoming more and more RIS4, so taking the fourth S as the sustainability there, so smart specialization strategy is and will be a much stronger instrument in integrating the different EU policies and EU and local financing at the real life action level. And that is something that we, through the Committee of the Region, we can play an instrumental role. So with these addresses, so I really once again stress that you, the Parliament, you have a especially strong role on carbon pricing system, trade agreements, which all need to be so strong in operationalizing this global movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Markula, for underlining the importance of multi-level governance, also multi-stakeholder collaboration towards a systemic approach, but also the urgent need to prioritize climate adaptation, research and innovation policy, including science for policy, but also vice versa, policy for science, the key role of implementation at local and regional policy levels, but also addressing financing at the real life action level, as mentioned previously. So on this note, I would like to provide the floor to Mr. Oliver Löbel, who is the Secretary General of EURO, the European Federation of National Associations of Water Services. Mr. Löbel has extensive experience in European affairs and policy making, with a particular focus on sustainable water, but also energy policies. So, Mr. Löbel, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much. Dear members of the European Parliament, dear participants. So we have heard now very interesting presentations with a more cross-cutting horizontal approach, and I will now look a bit more into the impact or the adaptation requirements in the water sector. So EURO is the European Association of Drinking Water and Wastewater Operators with 34 national organizations from 29 countries. So a very wide network of large and small utilities. Perhaps before we start, a few interesting numbers. So what are we talking about? So public water services, drinking water, wastewater, account for about 12% of Europe's water use. And each of the EU inhabitants consumes about 124 liters per day. And what we can see, I think very interestingly, is a declining trend over the past decades. So a very steady decline that we can notice. On the other hand, water operators are very heavily affected by climate change. I will just give you a few examples. It's not exhaustive. Of course, when we talk about droughts and heat waves, you see a rising water demand. So it can be short in period of in time, but a very steep increase due to increased watering of gardens, swimming pools, more frequent showers, etc. On the other hand, the quantity of drinking water resources may go down. So you may have aquifers that didn't replenish during the wetter seasons. Water reservoirs are falling below critical levels, or other surface waters have very low water levels. And this can, of course, also lead to water allocation issues. Who is served first? Is it industry, agriculture, public water supply, etc.? So I will come back to this in a minute. And what we have perhaps not heard yet, it's the quality also of drinking water resources. The less water you have in an aquifer, in a surface water body, the less dilution of pollutants we have. And this means that the concentration of pollutants may increase when water levels fall. And this can put us in a very difficult situation. Looking at floods or heavy rain events, which we have seen rising across the continent, one of the undesired effects is, of course, combined sewer overflow. So sewers that both take drinking water and road runoff have overflow points to protect wastewater treatment plants. If too much rainwater enters the sewer, untreated wastewater may be pushed out of it and pollute surface water bodies. Rising temperatures have an impact, of course, on the quality of water resources and also drinking water. So you may need to disinfect more to keep the water safe during distribution. Rising sea levels have been mentioned. For us, one big problem is, of course, saltwater intrusion then into aquifers in coastal areas, which can make them unusable for drinking water production. Let's look a bit at adaptation measures to climate change. So what does, for example, the drinking water sector do? What does the wastewater sector do? So efforts have been ongoing for more than a decade now. One problem that we still face sometimes is the lack of climate data at the micro level. So we can predict it for larger regions, for countries, for continents, but what it means for a single municipality, single utility is often difficult to predict. So sometimes planning is therefore more difficult. What we need to do and what is being done is, of course, knowing your weaknesses and adjusting to likely changes ahead through, first of all, risk assessment. So you know what the risks are, you take measures to meet those risks. And secondly, through contingency plans at the moment of a crisis. So risk management, for example, you can develop alternative water supply sources. You can build interconnectors with other municipalities. And of course, you call on water consumers to save water. Contingency plans, this needs to be developed. And we have heard this already really between utilities, municipalities, authorities, civil protection bodies to be prepared in a crisis situation and guarantee public water supply. We plead in favor of water allocation schemes that prioritize public water supply in times of shortage. We have this already in a number of EU countries like the Czech Republic, Spain, and the Netherlands. And it ensures that water supply is always guaranteed. As I mentioned before, we need to protect water from pollution because the higher the concentrations of pollutants in water resources, the more complicated and expensive drinking water production becomes. And we have to favor water reuse, of course. So reclaimed water, for example, from especially treated wastewater, in order to reduce the demand, for example, from agriculture and industry for water. And leakage reduction is one very important point to reduce the amount of water which is produced but does not reach the tap. In terms of wastewater, I would point again at risk management. So we have to prevent stormwater from reaching the sewers. And here in particular, we have to build on nature-based solutions. So we have good examples in a number of countries, rainwater trenches, stormwater ponds, etc., which allow the water to seep away and not enter the sewers while adding to the quality of life of municipalities. We may also have to add investments in the wastewater infrastructure, for example, by replacing combined sewers through separate sewers, which is very expensive and not easily doable in a number of areas. And we can also increase stormwater storage through specific stormwater tanks or so. But we have a preference wherever possible to build on nature-based solutions. And as I mentioned before, the wastewater side is willing to invest more in water recycling, make water available for reuse where it is needed. And again, I point at pollution. If we have heavily polluted wastewater with pollutants that are not easily removable, water reuse becomes very expensive or virtually impossible. So last slide, what do we expect? What do we need? It has been mentioned already, we need a coordinated approach. So we cannot do this alone. We cannot just add sewers in the ground. This will not solve the problem. So we need to bring all relevant actors together, in particular urban planners. So less concrete, less asphalt in cities, more green areas, let rainwater seep away, replenish aquifers and not enter the sewers. And of course, the planning needs to involve the whole river basin. We need to implement legislation like the Water Framework Directive, Groundwater Directive, and we believe that drought management plans should become compulsory. The previous years, 2018 to 2020, have shown that no European region is on the safe side. They can all be exposed to very strong droughts. We need European strategies. Yes, we need a European framework, but the solutions must be local, very important, because the differences are tremendous between regions. So allow for local solutions. Financing has been mentioned already. That's, of course, also a very important topic for us. Cost recovery needs to be ensured through tariffs, through transfers or taxes. So we will probably need also support from the EU, from national funds to cope with climate change. Building an interconnector between municipalities, building separate sewers are very capital intensive, and it may exceed the capacity of many utilities, which at the same time have to guarantee affordability. The recovery funds has been mentioned. Recovery fund. We see some countries like Italy dedicating a lot of money to water. Others like France a bit, and again others, I think like Germany, they have nothing in their plans on the water sector. So here again, tremendous differences. Last point, I pointed out again, pollution is for us a key topic. So the precautionary and control at source principles must be implemented to reduce the pollution of the water cycle. I can give you just one example to end. If we have to implement reverse osmosis to remove PFAS from drinking water resources, it increases water consumption by 15%. So all other efforts would be basically eliminated by this one very expensive and very resource intensive treatment. So to end, cooperation, knowledge are really key, and we are willing to work with all partners to make this a reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Glebel, for underlining the key role of the water services, their significant impacts of climate change, but also the challenges and opportunities concerning adaptation via risk assessment, contingency plans, water allocation schemes, leakage reduction, managing runoff, of course, and water recycling. And then underlining in your final policy priorities, the need for legislation implementation, ensuring financing, but also a well-coordinated approach. While I would like to let you know that we keep receiving very positive comments in the chat box regarding the delivery of such an inspiring event, quoting that listening to speakers is like a symbol to the mission and the vision outlined. I would like to take the opportunity to invite our audience to send us also their questions via the Q&As box at the right top of your screen, indicating the speaker to whom your question is best addressed, but please ensuring that you choose the all panelists option. On this note, I would like to provide the floor to Ms. Françoise Bonnet, who is our next speaker and the Secretary General of ACR+, the Association of Cities and Regions for Sustainable Resource Management. Prior to joining ACR+, Ms. Bonnet was head of unit on waste in the Brussels region, and over her professional career in both the public and private sectors, Ms. Bonnet has accumulated a thorough knowledge of the European waste legislation and policies. So, Ms. Bonnet, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Elias, and dear participant, dear member of the Parliament. I'm really pleased to be with you today. I will try to share my screen to be sure that, let's see. Sorry, yes, I think this is, hopefully it works.
Yes, works perfectly.
Yes?
Thank you.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be with you today and to give a little insight of what ACR+ is trying to do with the local and regional authorities in order to step up climate adaptation action. For those who do not know us so well, ACR+ is an international network of cities and regions sharing the aim of promoting a sustainable resource management and accelerating the transition towards a circular economy on their territories and beyond. So we have been existing since more than 25 years, and we have always this multi-stakeholders approach. I think that Oliver already mentioned it, that we need really to coordinate and to collaborate with different policies and different actors. And it is exactly what we have been trying to do and still trying to do now. And we also have in mind that public authorities, of course, at national level, but at decentralized level, are this bridge between the consumers and the producers, so the demand and the supply sides, and so that they have a very strong role of facilitating and regulating the actions without, of course, forgetting the social aspects, as it was mentioned before. So we try to push and to support our members to be front runners on their territories through exchange of practices, participation to research and innovation projects, benchmarking and indicators. And indicators is a little bit what I would like to develop today with my presentation. So over the last 30 years, we can see that we had a lot of achievements, thanks especially to the waste legislation, the EU waste legislation, quite a very good legislative framework. So a lot of an important and increased collection rate and recycling rate of waste. And you can see on the slide also that we have reached to decrease a decrease of the weight of certain, for example, PET bottles. So yes, we have achieved a lot of great results. And now I'm really happy to see also that with the new eco-design approach, we integrate not only the energy efficiency, but also we try to combine more this with sustainable use of resource when conceiving new products. So a good example is the battery directive, still to be adapted, and the lighting directive, where we see that we really try to combine energy and resource efficiency. But despite all these results, I just highlight here the plastic issue. We still have big problems because, for example, when we look at plastics, we still have a huge amount of plastic produced. So we do not decrease the quantity. Maybe we decrease the weight of PET bottles. We decrease, yes, some kind of packaging items, but we don't decrease the global quantity of plastic that we produce. And it's not only plastic that can be shown as an example, but we have still a lot of, let's say, problem, and we need to connect more what we measure in terms of CO2 and how we consume and produce. And that's why we have decided at the end of 2019 with our members to launch a campaign, More Circularity, Less Carbon, minus 25% by 2025. And 2025, of course, is just to give us an objective, but we keep going in order to decrease this 25% of our carbon impact in our consumption and production patterns. And why did we wanted to launch this campaign? Because we started from an observation. We are still with a lack of awareness about how our way of consuming and producing have impact on our CO2 emissions. You know that when we look at the UN work on waste management and impact, they concentrate a lot on the impact of landfilling the waste. But we need to go behind, and we need to see how much CO2 emission we produce, we emit when producing products and when consuming products. And so, of course, if we do not have a sustainable consumption and production, we also increase our CO2 emissions. So the first observation that we had was that there was a clear lack of awareness among the different actors. And circular economy is part of the game when we speak about climate mitigation. Another observation that we had was that all the targets in the waste legislation are calculated in kilograms. And so the connection between the CO2 impacts are not always clear. So you decrease you increase the collection rate by kilos of waste. You increase the recycling rate by kilos. But when you recycle a certain type of material, maybe you have less impact than recycling another material. Or when you decrease the quantity of waste produced of certain kind of material, you have more impact in terms of CO2. So that's why we tried to think about how to help our members to have a better circular economy strategy, linking more the climate mitigation and the CO2 emissions with their circular economy strategy. And that's why we launched this campaign. And the idea is really to help them to measure their CO2 emission in the field of products, consumption, and to help them in reducing it. And as indicator, we use an international carbon matrix elaborated by our member Zero Waste Scotland. Zero Waste Scotland is a public body created by the Scottish government and financed by, I think 80% of their financing is made of public money, and they try to put measure and to help local authorities and all the different actors on their territory to have better actions in terms of CO2 emissions decreasing. And so they elaborated these metrics, and they are able to calculate the CO2 emissions on a territory for your consumption and production. And so we try to, for each of our members and all other volunteers, to have this T0 with the quantities and selecting where they could have a more impact actions. And what is interesting to see, and on the slide you can see, of course, different sector where we see that you can have a strong impact, especially the organic fraction, plastics, but also textiles, without forgetting the construction and all the electronic and electric devices that we use. And so what we see is that by certain actions implemented at local level, we can already make a difference. And so by analyzing all the data on the territory, we can help our members, and I mean, in general, local and regional authorities, so cities or regions, to focus on certain sector. And we have done already the exercise with several members, like Pays de la Loire in France, Brussels, Genoa in Italy. We are doing the same exercise with Dublin, Belfast, and other interesting regions and cities in Europe. Another very important point that we have noticed during this exercise is that we really need prevention targets, because so far we have some qualitative targets, especially when we speak about packaging, and now with the new battery directive. But we need to really decrease the quantity of waste that we generate, because it's there that we have a lot of potentialities in terms of CO2 savings. So we really advocate to have, when we will have to review the Waste Framework Directive in 2024, to consider to have a strong prevention target written in the legislation. Targets are key for public authorities because they can decline and they can rely on that in order to implement concrete activities on their territories. And in terms also of investment, when you know that you will have to decrease the quantity of waste that you will put in a landfill or in a waste to energy plant, you know that you need to have a perspective and to decrease your infrastructure, this kind of infrastructure. So it's really important to have targets, but including prevention targets. Also, what is really important is to push forward to have more sustainable products. And for that, we have this EPR principle, the extended producer responsibility. We advocate to use more and more this instrument, and not only by thinking about EPR schemes like we have already implemented for packaging. Each type of product has its own possibilities and its own tailored instrument, I think. So when we speak about EPR, we need to involve, of course, at the first place, the producers. And maybe for some of the products, it's better to have a kind of individual responsibilities, but we need to push them to get it. So by, again, a very well-designed legal framework in order to push for more reusable and repairable product put on the market. And of course, recyclable. But if we speak about prevention, we need to have more long-lasting product on the market. So thank you very much for your attention, and I invite you to visit our website, because we also try to be involved with our members in a lot of research and innovation projects, because we think it's really important to collaborate all together and to implement good research and solution at local level on a very pragmatic and concrete level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bonnet, for adding also the very important elements of circularity, but also sustainability to the discussion via underlining the results of the More Circularity, Less Carbon campaign towards sustainable consumption and production, but also the key role of prevention targets as well as EPR. On this note, I would like to introduce you our next speaker, Ms. Cynthia Lozeno, who is the Senior Climate Change Specialist within the Projects Directorate at the European Investment Bank. Prior to that, to holding her current position, Ms. Lozeno also worked as a Senior Climate Change Specialist at the Asian Development Bank. So, Ms. Lozeno, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Elias, and I'm delighted to be here today with this distinguished panel. I'd like to thank our host, Ms. Kumpula-Natri and Ms. Spyraki, and of course the European Parliament Intergroup on Climate Change, Biodiversity and Sustainable Development for organizing this event and for having me today. I don't have any slides, and in the next few minutes, I would just like to share with you the work that we are doing in the EIB, in the European Investment Bank, to support adaptation in the EU and globally. And I'll also like to share with you some of the lessons that we have learned in providing finance for adaptation over the last 10 years. So EIB has committed to a new level of ambition on climate action and environmental sustainability. We committed to, first of all, stop supporting fossil-based energy generation. We committed to align all financing activities with the principles of the Paris Agreement. We also committed to dedicate at least 50% of our financing to climate action and environmental sustainability by 2025. And help unlock at least 1 trillion euro of investments dedicated to climate action and environmental sustainability from public and private partners by 2030. So EIB is really committed to become the EU climate bank, and to do so, we launched a climate bank roadmap at the end of last year to guide us through this transition. Now, adaptation to climate change is a key pillar of these commitments. It was back in 2015 when the EIB came up with its first climate strategy, and it will be even more so moving forward. We support adaptation to climate change in at least 3 ways. First of all, we screen all our projects for physical climate risk and work with our clients to ensure that our investments are as resilient to future climate as they can be. And to do so, we had to develop our own business process and our institutional capacity to be able to systematically assess how climate change may affect the performance of a project and inform adaptation planning at a project level. So just to give you an example, we heard earlier from Mr. Lebel on stormwater storage, and we do several of these investments. So we funded a wastewater treatment plant in a coastal lands. The project was screened and found to be a risk from sea level rise, potentially affecting over 300,000 people. So we used climate model projections to understand how precipitation may change over the lifetime of a project and estimated the risk of overflow or untreated wastewater discharges. So because of these assessments and this deeper understanding of how future climate may affect that particular project, measures were included in the project design to control the flows of the sewer system, and additional storage tanks were integrated in the project to reduce the risks. This is just one example of how the European Investment Bank can support partners in the EU and outside the EU in ensuring more resilient infrastructure projects. Other examples are investments in the reinforcement of dikes, coastal defense in the northern Europe to protect natural and built environment by rising sea level, investment to protect public buildings, hospitals, social housing from increased severity of heat waves, floods, and landslides. We think that the use of robust climate data to inform investment decision is what we consider good practice. We need to do more of that. We need to understand how the future may change and affect what we are planning now. The second way we support adaptation is by exploring ways to invest more in climate resilience opportunities. By opportunities, we mean technologies, products and services and engineering solutions that can really remove technological and knowledge barriers and support adaptation globally. The EU plays a key role in driving forward technological innovation in a number of sectors, from crops more resistant to droughts and floods, to water-saving technologies, satellites for Earth observation, just to name a few examples. European companies are at the forefront of creating value by developing and commercializing products that can help customers adapt to climate change across the globe. And the EIB is well placed certainly to support this innovation and transformation in these growing markets. Finally, we're also looking at ways of supporting better our partners by providing dedicated advisory services. This is with the aim to help our public and private sector clients in developing their knowledge and processes to cope with increased physical climate risk. We want to work with cities, businesses, asset managers, financial intermediaries to develop their own systems to anticipate and manage the risk resulting from a changing climate. We also want to work with our EU partners to build capacity of different entities to assess their risk and integrate adaptation measures in their operations. Now, we think the EIB, in its new capacity of the EU Climate Bank, must play a key role in forging a resilient Europe. We will come forward by the end of this year with an adaptation plan. It's the first of a kind for the EIB to support the objectives of the EU adaptation strategy, outlining our offerings to support EU member states and international partners adapt to climate change. Now I would like to turn to some of the lessons and the challenges that still remain. mean, we have seen many developments in the EU with the EU adaptation strategy, the Green Deal, the EU taxonomy on sustainable finance, which I had the pleasure to work for, the EU climate law, and all these developments have now a strong focus on the need to adapt. Now, a mission on adaptation focusing on citizens and supporting the goal of a resilient Europe is timely and truly needed to plan for a changing climate. So in the year of action of adaptation, this is the year of action of adaptation, the EU is definitely leading the way. So I really congratulate the Commission, the Parliament, and all the EU entities that have been involved in really promoting and scaling up action on adaptation. But there's still plenty of work to do, and there are still so many challenges when it comes to adapt on the ground, really. And I'd like to share at least 3 lessons that we have learned in doing our work as a bank. The first point is that the EU really is not a safe haven. And there is plenty of evidence of that, unfortunately. We heard
Unfortunately, it seems that there is an issue with the connection of Ms. Loseno, but perhaps we could wait for a second to see if this can be fixed. Otherwise, I would suggest that we proceed with the next speaker. As I am afraid that we cannot further assist at this stage on behalf of the European Parliament Intergroup Secretariat, I would like to thank Ms. Lozano for her intervention, highlighting the best practices via the work of EIB, sharing also the key opportunities via the Climate Bank Roadmap for 21 to 2025, including supporting 1 trillion euros in investments for climate action and environmental sustainability, but also aligning the work of EIB and its activities with the Paris Agreement targets, as well as allocating more than 50% of annual financing to green investments by 2025. So, well, I'm very much sorry for the technical issues experienced. I would like to provide the floor seamlessly to Mr. Luc Bass, who is the European Regional Director for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Prior to that, Mr. Bass was also European Director of the Climate Group in Brussels, working with businesses and governments to achieve a more ambitious EU climate policy. So, Mr. Bass, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ilias, and thank you for inviting us and for me to have a few comments. And it's very unfortunate that Cynthia disappeared, because she was actually pointing at the most important part of all of this, to get the investment and the finance in the right direction, because it's all going to be about huge investments that we need to make, and we need to get away from this notion of cost, which is still the case very often in adaptation and adaptation measures. So it's really investment, sometimes a bit longer term, but even in the midterm, it's already paying off. There was a lot of information already shared. I will try not to duplicate. I'm also going to pick up on some things I've heard. First of all, of course, we need to always be conscious when we are going to put more attention to adaptation, which is dearly needed. We cannot have in any way see any reduction in efforts on mitigation, which is often witnessed. So we have to be careful, and it's a really and discussion, it's not or. The beauty of what you can imagine, I will be talking about nature-based solutions, is that it's a double whammy. You will have your mitigation effect if you do it right, and you will have an adaptation effort that adds to your resilience. So great that there's adaptation strategies on the table. I don't think we've ever seen a more focused and structured document from the European Commission, so we are very happy with what is there. Also, the mission that Connie is leading is really promising, the fact that it gets all that attention as a separate mission, even to work with stakeholders to get to real action. It was great to hear from the local governments here, which are crucial for all of this. They are the ones that actually are going to have to do it. Adaptation is a local solution for a global issue or a global challenge. And so we need to get them fully on board. And I'm happy to say that we are at ICN putting a resolution forward for the Congress in September in which we want also local governments to be able to become full members of ICN, and we hope our membership, which are states, governments and NGOs, will vote in favor of embracing that membership. So because it's so crucial to implement these nature-based solutions that I want to quickly address here. That said, much of the advertisement that I need to do for nature-based solutions has already been done. That was great to hear from the water sector, which seems to be more and more understanding and recognizing that these are very good investments and no regret measures with all other co-benefits that were mentioned also, I think, by the local government representative. It was interesting to see that the ACR, also with the local governments, but interesting to see the link to the consumption part and adaptation. Of course, there's a lot that can be linked to this dual challenge that we have in front of us, which is biodiversity loss and climate change. And of course, consumption is a huge and important part. But let's not forget that most of our consumption, or the effects of our consumption, are actually not even in Europe. They are outside of Europe. And so we have a huge global responsibility in our Green Deal implementation and making sure that what we do in Europe will not have shifting any problem to the third countries. So yes, we have to make adaptation an investment. Therefore, good to hear about the European Investment Bank going closer and closer. It's clear that these biodiversity loss and climate change is getting a bit more similar attention, where climate change was very high up the agenda. Now biodiversity loss seems to be as well. Last year should have been a super year for nature, but unfortunately, COVID prevented that from really becoming so. This year is the second chance with the Congress of ICN, with the CBD COP for the post-2020 framework, and of course, seeing the UK leading on a lot of attention for nature-based solutions at the COP26 in Glasgow. So that's promising. The other promising part is the Decade of Ecosystem Restoration that was just initiated a few weeks ago. So if we scale up nature-based solutions, which, by the way, I want to emphasize, we will never say this is a silver bullet for all the problems and societal challenges that we have, but there will be a good opportunity with nature-based solutions to also get away from this silo thinking that still even exists in the environmental arena when discussing the challenges. And so, as said before, mitigation and adaptation are achieved by a nature-based solution when it's properly implemented. And we're happy to see there's so much reference also in the climate adaptation strategy to this part of the solution. We need, though, to get this solution right. And we need a level playing field, we need comparability, and we need some criteria, even be it minimal criteria, to understand what we mean by a nature-based solution, because we already have seen a lot of improvisation on the term. And therefore, again, we are also very happy to see that the climate adaptation strategy was referring to the global standard for NBS, for nature-based solutions at ICN, after many years of discussions with stakeholders and scientists, have agreed and hope that that will be also the framework in the EU when implementing these nature-based solutions. We see a lot of work, a lot of talk about the blue-green infrastructure. Again, this is maybe another word for this NBS, but I think it should be beyond green infrastructure. We have to make sure that the social and economic benefits are clearly in place and also measured. It has been said, we talk a lot about forests and sustainable managing forest, planting trees. Again, this needs to happen in a proper context, the ecosystem-based approach. Not forgetting restoring of wetlands, crucial for water management, peatlands, coastal ecosystems. So there is a lot of opportunity and a lot to do, but we will have to better quantify those benefits for the EIB to make the case for lending the funding, for governments to invest, but also for private investors to join the investment needs in nature-based solutions. There are many promises, of course, and frameworks in the EU is really taking a lead, and ICN is also seeing this, recognizing this, and communicating it to the rest of the membership outside of the EU. Also with the forest strategy coming up, there's a lot of good things in there. If we look at to finalize a little bit on the other policies that are so crucial, we can, of course, not look beyond how cohesion policy programs could be better adapted to, and again, another way of adaptation for adaptation. But to make sure that these nature-based solutions get a better chance. Again, sometimes in a hybrid move to do that. Of course, we can have a lot of discussion about all of this, but if we do not get the common agriculture policy right, which apparently we didn't succeed this week where it was planned, but maybe it's better to have not succeeded and avoiding mistakes from the past and hoping to have an agreement that is very nature-friendly in the near future. 30% of the EU budget is for climate action. We all know that this is way, way down the line when it comes to biodiversity loss tackling and nature-based solutions. So we hope that we see some increase also in how much of the climate budget, let's say, is being put forward for adaptation and using nature as a partner. And then finally, the national recovery and resilience plans, again, promising to see 37% of expenditure for climate investment. But again, there's much less that we see that is steered towards nature-based solutions. Strangely enough, because it's a no regret measure and a good return on investment if we do measure it right. That said, measuring is always crucial. I heard a comment earlier on that a lot of knowledge still has to be collected, especially on water aquifers and how they are being replenished or not. So that's important. But we also need some kind of framework in which we account for natural capital, because when we have the big restoration plan of the EU, hopefully very ambitiously implemented, that will need an investment, and then we'll have to see, okay, who gets and where goes the return on investment, and how is the investor being rewarded to do so. And for that, we will need a natural capital accounting framework to do that. One very important point to stop is we are talking about the EU level here, high ambition at the EU level, but everything will either fall or be successful with high ambition from the member states. We need already now clear commitments from member states that go beyond in their restoration actions. They don't have to wait for these legally binding targets. And again, those that will be doing it upfront of these legal binding targets will be rewarded for what they've already invested in. So this coherence between all these Green Deal components, farm to fork strategy, circular economy plan is crucial, otherwise it won't happen. We need to mainstream nature into these sectors, making sure that funders and investors and decision makers are really confident that they can use these nature-based solutions and invest in them, and make sure that that the leadership of the EU in this kind of whole society approach is really continuously reflected. So looking forward to a very fast, ambitious and well funded and supported implementation of the EU climate adaptation strategy. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bass, for underlining the importance of adaptation via the key work of IUCN, highlighting the significant need to involve the local level towards implementation, but also ensuring financing and also adding biodiversity and nature-based solutions to the equation, stressing also the need to avoid thinking and working in silos. Before we move to the reactions from MEPs, I would just like to kindly provide the floor back to Ms. Lozano, as I see that she is now well connected. Unfortunately, due to the fact that her intervention was cut short, we didn't manage to hear your key takeaway messages, Ms. Lozano. So seeing also that we're running late with regards to the agenda, I would just like to kindly ask you to please wrap up your intervention in less than a minute if possible, so that we can proceed with MEP's reactions as well. Thank you very much.
Certainly, and thank you very much, Elias, for this second chance. Not quite sure what happened, but I'm glad to be back. I think I was about to share with you some of our key lessons learned over the last 10 years of financing adaptation, and I'll be very short. The first one is definitely that the EU is not a safe haven. We see that in the way our partners approach the EIB and request their financing to increase the resilience of their operations, whether they are cities, whether they are businesses, corporates, small or medium enterprises, asset managers. There is definitely an increasing demand for adaptation financing, but we also see that there is still a huge mismatch between the understanding, the need and the ability of packaging this need in projects that really can be financed, that are bankable. So it's very sometimes limiting for a large bank like the EIB to really provide meaningful support when that request doesn't really come in a way that it really looks like a bankable project. So the EIB is very well, we stand ready to support our clients to fill that gap and move from the need to a well, let's say, well-packaged demand for adaptation finance. Really, the EU is no safe haven, but this mismatch between increasing this, the increased scale of the threat and the capacity to deal with this threat needs to be looked into. And I think this is also something that the mission adaptation can definitely support at so many levels. The second point is about the opportunities. We need to reinvest in innovation and solution, and we are well placed to do so because really the EU is at the forefront of technological transformation. We've seen this with the need for a transformation to a low carbon economy. There are lessons learned that we can learn from that process and build on that to also evolve and transform to a climate resilient economy through the use of innovation and investing in opportunities for climate adaptation. And then the third point is really to do with the regulatory environment. We need to have stronger regulatory environment. Already the EU is moving towards that from at different levels and with initiatives or different types, but these regulatory frameworks are absolutely crucial to encourage business and individuals to invest in resilient solutions and contribute to market creation. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm very interested in hearing the views of the panel and the audience on these challenges and how the mission adaptation can help overcome these barriers. I thank you for your attention and for the second chance, and really look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lozano. On this note, I would like to provide the floor to MEP Ms. Livia Pereira. Ms. Pereira is a member of the European Parliament for the EPP Group since 2019, and also as a substitute member of the Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety. MEP Ms. Pereira has also participated in the European Parliament motion for resolution on the EU strategy on adaptation to climate change. So I think we're all very much looking forward to hearing more about that, Ms. Pereira. Thank you very much.
Hello, good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to address this very important and dear topic to me. And I would like to congratulate all the speakers for all the interventions and a lot of points raised that I absolutely relate to. And I would start by saying that we cannot ignore that there are already irreversible climate change effects in certain regions that are more prominent in certain regions in Europe. I come from a country that is going to be very much affected by climate change, by all the studies that have been published. There is that indication, and so we cannot ignore. But unfortunately, climate adaptation is still a little neglected in the political discourse, and it is usually like we've been talking about climate mitigation. And we have to, we have to keep it as a political priority, as Luc Bas rightly said. But we cannot. We also have to face the reality that there are already some changes that are going to be very hard to reverse. We see in the course of time, and I'm turning 30 years old this year, but I hear my parents. And I can feel it that seasons are not as they used to be when I was a child. We see it in Portugal, more prolonged droughts. We see it more floods in unexpected times of the year. We see the rising temperatures, like we've been hitting or beating record temperature levels in the past 5 years. And of course, also the rising sea levels. And I'm not from a coastal area, but I'm half hour away from the seaside. And even recently, I had the opportunity to see with my own eyes what are the effects taking place with the rising sea levels and the effects it has on the communities that live in these coastal areas. And so I think here, one of the main points that I think will be crucial or vital in the success of our climate mitigation and adaptation efforts is the infrastructure adaptation. We have to be very sensitive towards that, and we have, in all the policies that we are developing, we have to make sure that there is this concern put at the heart of the strategies, and for that we need financing. And I've been raising awareness for the fact that we have a Just Transition Fund, but maybe we should have a climate adaptation fund as well. It is indeed true that we are allocating 37% of the Next Generation EU. We have 30% of the expenses within the multi-annual financial framework allocated for environment, but I don't think it is sufficient. So we have to be ambitious. And we have to, and all the speakers mentioned that, and I very much want to underline the importance of multi-level governance, in particular from the local governments, because we set the targets in Brussels, Strasbourg, we can set the targets. We have ambitious targets for 2030, for 2050, but in the end, it's up to the local governments to implement the necessary instruments and policies to make sure that we comply and that we can meet those targets. So I think in the end, what we are talking about, and there was a point mentioned about measuring, and I've been also saying that what we cannot measure, we cannot improve. And so this is crucial to make sure that we are, applying the right policies, that we are monitoring the right policies, that we are evaluating, and that we are adjusting whenever it is necessary. And in the end, what we are talking about also is sustainability. If we are facing disruption from a digital perspective, we are also facing a disruption from a climate and environmental perspective. And if we cannot assure that communities are prepared to deal with these challenges, that businesses have to succeed within this challenging framework, we are also putting at stake the financial sustainability of countries or regions. And so in the end, it's all connected. It's like the circular economy. Here, when we talk about environment, it's about sustainability, and it's the societal challenges and changes that we have to accommodate and fine tune in the course of time. So just to finalize and to conclude, I think it's there are 3 points that I find relevant to keep an eye on. One is about measuring. The other one is about financing, in particular financing infrastructure, financing and finding instruments to make possible for communities to adapt to climate change. And also politically, that climate adaptation has to be, together with climate mitigation, a top priority. And because in the end, we want to deliver for the future generations, but we also want to deliver for the present generations. And so we have we have a duty not to neglect that these two topics are combined, and that they are very much necessary for the success for our own success, and for the success of all communities spread all over Europe and also in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pereira, for your intervention, and also for your work within the European Parliament in prioritizing adaptation, as well as for highlighting within your speech the main challenges and opportunities, including measuring, financing, but also our moral duty to act with regards to the role of adaptation. So I would like to, on this note, welcome another MEP Ms. Jutta Guteland, who is a member of the S&D group in the European Parliament since 2014, and inter alia the S&D coordinator as well in the ENVI committee, but also within the umbrella of the intergroup, the co-chair of the Sustainable Forest Management Working Group, and last but not least, the rapporteur of the European Climate Law. So, Ms. Guteland, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Ilias, for inviting me, and thank you for this excellent seminar with very with a very good panel and interesting discussions. I really believe it is timely to also highlight the importance of climate adaptation. And I must also agree to my colleague Lydia in her intervention about how important it is that we see that high ambition in climate policy is truly important, but we cannot neglect that we will need to adapt to warmer climate. So we also in parallel needs to have a good strategy for EU and also globally to handle the warmer climate that is already happening and will continue to happening. And that is really important that we do more. I come from a country, I could also mention that I come from a country who might been seen historically at least as a country who would not be as affected since it's a Nordic country. I come from Sweden and of course used to have not such a warm climate. But recently, I believe that there have been many reports showing that also Nordic countries will be tremendously infected by the global heating. Already we see that we have warmer summers than we had historically when I was growing up. And these summers also means that we have more fires, forest fires, than we had back then. And that is, of course, changing the situation for the people farming, but also forest owners. The situation is also, of course, very dangerous. And it is a situation that is not good for the ecosystems. So we are already affected even in the Nordic countries, and that will escalate. So therefore it's extremely important that we talk about adaptation. But I would also like to start with the importance of climate policy as such, and to halt the global heating. The pandemic taught us a very important lesson. The cost of inaction is enormous, and we all know that now. There are estimates that the pandemic prevention actions are 100 times as effective than risking virus to spread loose the way it was with this COVID-19. And the same goes for climate. So we need to understand that. And I really, during this pandemic era, have been very motivated to prevent future crises, and seen that the global heating is the biggest of them that will affect so many areas in the society. Climate-related extreme weather already costs 12 billion euro per year, and this could rise to 170 billion euro if we have a 3-degree scenario. This is, of course, dramatic, and I don't think we can understand what it means. Of course, this also affects the health. The heat waves alone cost 2,500 deaths in 2019, and this will also rise. This is tragedies that is happening. And we must do everything we can to curb emissions pathway and limit global heating to well below 2 degrees, of course, and honor the Paris Agreement, with also coming close to 1.5. That must be our goal. However, our aim to limit climate change cannot stand in way for preparing for disasters that is already here and will get worse if we don't adapt. And therefore, we need the best innovation possible to adapt to the warmer climate, as I started this intervention by saying. I don't believe that there is contradiction between these two important things. We need both to cut emissions and adapt to the warmer weather. Even if we did take action more than we are doing today and really get the world to do everything needed, We know that the kind of feedback loops we see now have just started. And I think one example is that many of us realized the situation and how grave it is with the methane from the permafrost. And that is a really scary example, and we might see more of that. And therefore, I believe the discussions that we had here today on adaptation is so important. And the new EU strategy from the Commission on adaptation to climate change is also really important. My takeaways from today, and some of it at least from today, is that we need to do more. And I think Lydia summarized it in her 3 points, and I will summarize it kind of the same, but that's good. I think first of all, we need to see that adaptation is an investment, and it is an investment that will pay back for the society in many ways. I believe we need to learn that we don't have the data today that we need, and therefore measuring is always important. We need to have the very best robust data and risk assessment tools as possible in our adaptation plans. I believe that Horizon Europe and the climate mission to climate adaptation there is will play a key role in the empowering innovation. So we need to use that tool. I think what has also been stressed today, I think it was said by Mr. Bas, I think the coherence between strategies is really important, like biodiversity strategy, the farm to fork strategy, all the different strategies that we need the coherence here and see how they can work together for adaptation. And that is, of course, also the same goes for integration in climate adaptation needs to be done in all relevant policy areas. And that also needs to be more done than today. We need to do that better than today. And then lastly, I think we also, as the European Union, needs to help third countries and small island states who will suffer the most to mitigate the human suffering that we will see, and also help prevent disasters that is actually ongoing. So that would be my last point then on the summary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guteland, for first of all your leading work in the European Parliament with regards to all points mentioned, also for underlining the fact that we have to ensure high ambition in climate policy, especially in view of the cost of inaction, but also underlining the need to act to best adapt, as it is very important to proceed with respective adjustments in ecological, social, or economic systems in response to climatic stimuli and their impacts. Perhaps proceeding on with the short remaining part, I would say, of today's event, I would like to address 2 or maybe 3 questions from the audience very quickly that we have received. And to begin with, there is a question, and I'm going to read that out loud for our speakers. Perhaps we can have a short reply by Ms. Clara Della Torre from the European Commission. And the question reads, traditionally, most of climate finance has been going to mitigation and less to adaptation. How do you think we can reduce this imbalance?
Thank you. I couldn't find my button. Mrs. Guteland was saying that very well. I mean, we have to put on the same footing mitigation and adaptation. So we are, as the European Union, we are fostering the investment in adaptation inside the Union, but outside as well. And the opportunity of the COP is a great one because it is opportunity to make adaptation better seen, to make adaptation better known and understood by the citizens, and to mobilize further finance. There are the latest estimates that we have for funding of adaptation average 3 billion euros in 2017, but unfortunately the needs are estimated to be 10 times that figure. So we have to provide the funding. The global community has to provide the funding, but also we have to support, and the EU is trying to support partner countries precisely to unlock the existing resources, both public and private. And so facilitating their access for international resources, for example, the Green Climate Fund or the Adaptation Fund, and to help them, and our colleague from the EIB was telling us, and to embed the adaptation dimension in the financing strategies. And we need as well to ensure that we have financial resources that are reaching the most vulnerable communities in developing countries. So it's by making adaptation better known to the citizen and to the policymakers, by putting together available resources, by helping in designing the projects climate resilient, that we could reinforce the funds that can be made available to adaptation.
Thank you very much, Ms. De La Torre, for your reply, but also highlighting within that the upcoming COP, COP26, and the need for multi-stakeholder collaboration towards that. Perhaps we can also have a short follow-up comment by EIB and Ms. I'm sorry, Ms. Lozano on this note.
Certainly, thank you very much, Elias. And indeed, that is the question, isn't it? From our perspective, it is absolutely crucial to embed climate adaptation in any type of planning and strategic approach. We got very good at in embedding adaptation at project level. But that's not enough. We really have to think at what we do with physical climate risk in mind and shift the way we plan our cities, the way we plan our businesses, our infrastructure to be more climate resilient. This is what will generate indeed the demand for climate finance and will mobilize the finance for it. So that's what we hope to be able to be doing with our clients, working more at the strategic level to embed adaptation in basically everything we do.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lozano, for your remarks and for your reply. Perhaps another question we could take is towards Ms. Connie Hedegaard, and it reads, what do you see as the major opportunities and the challenges of the Horizon Europe mission going ahead? I'm aware that it also serves as a key summary of your intervention, so perhaps we can proceed with that. Ms. Hedegaard? I see Ms. Hedegaard is not connected, so maybe we can take a final question from the audience, and that is to all speakers. What are the roles of the private and public sector in adaptation, and how you think they differ compared to mitigation? Perhaps we can have that as an open question to speakers. So feel free to unmute and react. I see Mr. Bass.
Yes, I think there's of course a difference in how one invests from the public sector and from the private sector. That should be clear, and public funds obviously should serve public purpose. And that is, of course, a core issue, even in the debate on subsidies. A lot of harmful subsidies still existing. In the climate realm, still a lot of fossil fuel subsidies. So there's a lot of non-sustainable public financing still happening, which is actually quite unbelievable. And we know that a lot of the common agriculture policy funding is still not where it should be. So that's a first. We have to get what we have already in the right direction. Second point with public funding is, yeah, we need more of it. That means, yeah, you need some more income as well as a government to do that. So, and this links to what I think this climate justice or social justice is, which is also a part of the redistribution and also making sure not just the vulnerable countries outside of Europe, but also the vulnerable citizens are better protected and supported. And ultimately, this is a redistribution. And then finally, to private investors, I think I made a comment before, we need to, even though we are scrutinizing it a lot from IUCN as well and from the conservation community, and we have to be very careful not to commodify nature, but in one or another way, we need to give a return on investment to private investors, because it will simply not happen if this return on investment is not organized. Simple as that. It's not going to happen. And therefore, we need to use the tools as we have it. Financial systems are still not where they should be. The sustainable finance taxonomy will hopefully improve that. And then the system is better, and we have less risk for commodification of nature, but we need to better to put a monetary value to nature than none at all, which is the case today almost.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bas. Perhaps any other speaker that would like to react to the question?
Yeah, if I can briefly come in, Oliver Löbel from Euro, so I can fully support what Lucas just said. So cooperation will be key. One cannot without the other, so public cannot without the private sector and vice versa. And it all needs to be built on a long-term vision. So if I, as a private sector actor, want to survive in the long term, I will have to adapt to climate change as well. I have to see how my business is impacted in the long term and what I need to do to be in business in 10, 20, 30 years time from now if climate change continues. And this will, of course, lead to investments. But here we need also a clear regulatory framework that sets also the conditions for the private sector to develop. And on the other hand, of course, public sector must also provide support to the private sector, in particular smaller companies, to take up the challenges. Thank you.
Yes, Françoise, please.
Yes, just I would like to confirm, and as I mentioned, I mean, public sector, there are facilitator and regulators. So of course, a return to investment for private sector, but they need to have not a short-term vision and incentivize their investment and the good incentivators and the good legal framework. I mean, not too much, but not too little neither, because we know that we need to give the guidance. So facilitator and regulator as usual.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bonnet, for highlighting the ambition and equal balance between ambition and feasibility on the ground, but also highlighting the need for a clear regulatory framework with a long-term vision. Thank you very much, Oliver, as well, for echoing the same point, but also to Mr. Bas for adding the climate justice, but also the taxonomy elements to the discussion. So on this note, and seeing that we're just 5 minutes late with regards to wrapping up today's discussions, I would like to take the opportunity to thank very much all speakers and participants, honorable MEPs as well. Please allow me, participating MEPs, for kindly agreeing to take the lead and be part of today's discussions. Summing up the latter, I'm afraid that indeed, despite our best efforts to reduce emissions, climate change is taking place and is already underway, as underlined by Ms. De La Torre. So while the new EU strategy on adaptation to climate change sets the scene for more ambitious action, both domestically and internationally, research and innovation are going to be crucial for delivering this vision. I see that Ms. Guteland has opened her camera. I don't know if you would like to take the floor also for some closing remarks or key takeaway messages. No?
No.
Okay.
I think what's been said on the question was so well formulated by all the speakers. So, but I was really happy to attend this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guteland. And then also, if I may add, for wrapping up actually the event during your intervention, for highlighting also the key role of mission adaptation I would like to extend the warm thanks to all speakers for their contributions and key insights to the discussion, but also reiterate the key added value of mission adaptation as it is envisaged to work as a portfolio of actions on climate adaptation as presented during this event. I'm also happy that we have managed to find a strong broad consensus on the science policy nexus, science for policy, but also policy for science. The key role within that of research and innovation for the environment, society, but also the economy, underlining the importance of multi-level governance, multi-stakeholder collaboration. Of course, at the same time, ensuring financing, data measuring, collection, but also as underlined by all speakers and MEPs, high ambition in climate policy, but also the need to adapt are indeed the best roads ahead via avoiding thinking and working in silos, and as underlined by Ms. Guteland, via approaching adaptation as an investment for the future. So all in all, I'm afraid that we have reached the end of today's event. Very happy that with regards to mission adaptation, its vision is fully aligned with our work in the Parliament, connecting citizens with science and public policy. So I'm sure there will be plenty collaboration opportunities ahead. So once again, I would like to thank all speakers and participating MEPs, also our audience, for joining us today. And on behalf of the Secretariat of the European Parliament Intergroup, I'm equally very much looking forward to continuing the dialogue in the near future. So until then, all the best and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the Parliament, the members of Parliament.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Well,
Bye-bye.